"I'm your wife, can I suck it?" The shy rancher trembled, but when the bride did, he forgot everything. The ranch had been in his family for generations, and from the moment he could walk, he had been learning its rhythms. The soft sway of the wheat in the summer wind, the way the cows moved lazily across the fields, and the sound of the creek as it ran past the edge of the property. He loved the routine. It was predictable, safe, and comforting. Every morning he woke before the sun, saddled his horse, and checked on the animals, making sure everything was in order. Life on the ranch required patience, strength, and quiet observation, and Ethan had all three in abundance. He was a man of few words. His neighbors often said that he had a gentle heart but a mind that stayed to himself. He didn't go to town often, except when it was necessary. He didn't drink at the local saloon or mingle at social events. Instead, he preferred the company of his animals and the open fields. His parents had passed away when he was young, leaving him the ranch, and since then it had been his world, his home, his responsibility, and his comfort. Ethan's shyness made it difficult for him to form relationships outside of work. He sometimes watched other men in town laugh with their friends or women share stories at the market, and he felt an ache of longing he couldn't quite name. He wanted connection, he wanted companionship, but the thought of expressing his feelings made him uneasy. Talking to strangers was hard enough, and speaking his heart seemed impossible. Still, he carried on, day after day, in the quiet rhythm of his life. One early morning in late spring, a letter arrived at the ranch. Ethan had grown used to receiving small parcels of supplies, letters from friends of the family, or occasional news from the distant relatives. But this letter was different. It had a delicate, neat handwriting, and as he opened it, he realized it was from someone named Clara. She was to be his bride. The letter was polite, warm, and curious. She explained that she had agreed to marry him, and though she didn't know him well yet, she hoped they could find happiness together. Ethan's first reaction was a mix of nervousness and disbelief. He had never expected a letter like this. A bride, a companion, someone who would live with him in the small, quiet house he had always known as his own sanctuary. The thought of meeting her made him tremble slightly. His mind raced through questions. What would she be like? Would she like the ranch? Would she understand him? But beneath all the nerves there was a flicker of excitement, a spark that he hadn't felt in years. When Clara arrived at the ranch, Ethan waited quietly on the porch, his hands resting on the railing. He watched as she stepped off the carriage, her bright eyes scanning the ranch with curiosity and wonder. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen, confident, lively, and warm. Her smile was open and genuine, and though Ethan felt shy and unsure, her presence was immediately comforting. She greeted him politely but with an easy friendliness that made him feel less intimidated. The first few days were awkward. Ethan stumbled over words, unsure how to speak to her. Clara, on the other hand, seemed to understand his shyness. She never pushed him too hard. Instead, she observed him, learned his habits, and found gentle ways to draw him out. She would ask him about the horses, the fields, or the work he did each day, and Ethan would answer, his voice soft but sincere. Each conversation, however small, felt like a bridge forming between them. Clara had a way of bringing life to the quiet ranch. She noticed the little things, how Ethan always made sure the chickens were fed first, how he took extra care of the old horse that limped slightly, and how he sang softly to himself when he worked alone. She found joy in these details, and her appreciation encouraged Ethan to feel seen in a way he never had before. Slowly, he began to smile more often, though he still felt nervous in her presence. They spent time walking around the ranch together. Clara would explore the fields with curiosity, asking questions about the plants and animals. She laughed freely when a calf stumbled or a bird took flight, and Ethan found himself laughing too, surprised at how easily her happiness affected him. He realized that her joy didn't make him uncomfortable. It made him feel lighter, more alive. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of anticipation, wondering what the day would bring rather than simply going through the motions of work. Evenings on the ranch were quiet, yet filled with a new kind of warmth. They would sit on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Clara would talk about her childhood, her hopes, and small stories that made Ethan chuckle. At first, he responded with short answers, but gradually he began to share his own stories about growing up on the ranch, the animals he loved most, and the dreams he had once held. He discovered that speaking to her didn't feel frightening. It felt natural, like opening a window in a room that had been closed for too long. There were moments when Ethan felt nervous around her, moments when his shyness seemed to return in full force. When she touched his arm lightly to guide him, or when she teased him gently, he would blush and look away, unsure how to react. Yet Clara never mocked him or rushed him. She was patient, understanding that he needed time to adjust. That patience itself was a gift, a quiet affirmation that he could be himself and still be loved. As the days passed, Ethan started noticing the little things about Clara that made her special. The way she tilted her head when she listened carefully, the sparkle in her eyes when she laughed, and the gentle way she cared for the animals, often helping him feed them or mend fences without complaint. Her presence brought life to every corner of the ranch, and Ethan began to feel that maybe this marriage wasn't something to fear. It could be the beginning of a new chapter filled with companionship, trust, and quiet joy. One morning, Clara asked Ethan to show her the far end of the property, where the fields met the forest. It was a part of the ranch he rarely went to alone. He hesitated, unsure if he should take her there, worried she might find it boring. But when he saw her bright, encouraging smile, he nodded. Together, they walked across the open fields, Ethan explaining the plants, the soil, and the small creek that wound through the woods. Clara listened with genuine interest, asking questions and marveling at things Ethan had taken for granted. By the time they returned to the house, Ethan realized something had changed. He felt a warmth in his chest, a quiet happiness he hadn't known before. The ranch, which had always been a place of work and solitude, now felt like home in a completely new way. It wasn't just the land he loved, it was the shared experience, the presence of another person who cared, who laughed, and who encouraged him to see life differently. Though Ethan remained shy, he no longer felt trapped in his quiet world. Clara's presence had opened a door he hadn't known was there, a door that led to trust, companionship, and shared joy. He realized that being nervous or unsure didn't mean he was weak, it meant he was human. And as he watched Clara move about the ranch, her laughter carried on the wind, he felt a sense of hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. The first part of their journey had just begun. Ethan knew there would be challenges ahead, learning to truly open his heart, embracing new experiences, and finding the courage to express himself fully. But for the first time, he believed that with Clara by his side, he could face them all. And in that quiet ranch, under the vast sky and surrounded by the land he loved, a shy rancher and his curious bride had begun to write the first chapter of a story that would change both of their lives forever. The first week with Clara had passed, and Ethan was slowly becoming more comfortable with her presence. He still felt nervous around her at times, especially when she smiled at him in a way that made his chest tighten. Yet, every day, he noticed that her energy had a subtle effect on him. It was like the sun breaking through clouds he had forgotten existed. She was playful, warm, and curious, but never pushy. She understood the quiet nature of his world, and instead of forcing him out of it, she joined him gently, step by step. Clara had a habit of noticing small details that others might miss. One morning, as Ethan prepared to feed the animals, she asked him why he always brushed the horses in a particular way. Ethan paused, surprised that she had paid attention, and then explained carefully. She listened with her head tilted, eyes wide with genuine interest, and for the first time, Ethan felt that someone truly wanted to understand his world. It was a strange, yet comforting feeling. Over breakfast, Clara asked him about the different plants that grew in the fields. She didn't just ask. She wanted to know everything: the types of soil, how the rain affected growth, and even which areas were better for grazing animals. Ethan answered slowly, cautiously, but she laughed warmly at his explanations, never judging his shy pauses. Her laughter was different from anything he had heard before, soft, encouraging, and free. It made him relax in a way he hadn't in years. Despite the warmth, there were moments of awkwardness. Clara had a way of teasing him, gently nudging him to speak or try new things, and at first, Ethan didn't know how to react. If she playfully suggested he try a new task or experiment with something, he would stumble over words, cheeks flushing red. He had never been the center of attention in this way, and he wasn't used to someone focusing on him so closely. But Clara never mocked him or criticized him. She smiled, reassured him with kind words, and that little encouragement slowly made him feel safer in her presence. One afternoon, she suggested they explore the barn together. Ethan had always seen the barn as his workspace, a place for chores, not socializing. But Clara's curiosity turned it into something new. She asked about each tool, each stall, and each animal's habits. Ethan explained carefully, watching her eyes light up at details he had always considered ordinary. By the time they left the barn, Ethan noticed something unusual. He had actually enjoyed the experience. It wasn't just about work anymore. It was about sharing a part of himself and seeing it appreciated. As days passed, Ethan began noticing changes in his routine. He woke with a little more energy, anticipating conversations with Clara, or looking forward to her playful questions about the ranch. Even the work itself seemed lighter with her around. Feeding the animals, checking the fences, or collecting eggs, these tasks, which had once been solitary duties, now felt like shared adventures. Clara had a way of making the mundane extraordinary, simply by being present and interested. Clara also encouraged small adventures beyond the familiar parts of the ranch. One morning, she asked if they could ride to the nearby hills to watch the sunrise. Ethan hesitated at first. He had never taken visitors, or anyone, really, to the hills. The paths were steep, and it required a level of endurance he wasn't sure she would enjoy. But her insistence was gentle, paired with a smile that made him nod in agreement. That morning, as they climbed the hills together, Ethan noticed how Clara's excitement was contagious. When the sun rose, painting the world in soft hues of orange and gold, Ethan felt a sense of awe he hadn't experienced alone in years. Their conversations became deeper as well. Clara often asked about his childhood, about memories that were tucked away in dusty corners of his mind. Ethan had never been asked such questions before. Usually, people only wanted to know about work or the land, but Clara wanted to know him, the real him. Hesitantly, he shared stories about his parents, about the lessons they had taught him, and even about moments of loneliness he had felt growing up on the ranch. Clara listened without interruption, nodding and smiling, sometimes offering a small word of encouragement. Ethan realized that he was not only talking, but opening his heart in a way that felt safe. Evenings were their favorite time together. They would sit on the porch, sipping tea and watching the sky change colors. Ethan had spent countless evenings on that porch alone, but now the silence was different. It was shared, comfortable, and warm. Clara would hum softly or tell a funny story, and Ethan would laugh, sometimes louder than he expected. Each laugh, each shared glance, built a quiet connection between them. Slowly, the nervous tremors he felt in her presence began to fade, replaced by curiosity and affection. There were still moments of hesitation. When Clara reached out to touch his arm or leaned close while telling a story, Ethan would blush and look away. His shy nature didn't disappear overnight, but Clara never rushed him. She understood that trust was earned, not demanded. Her patience gave him confidence, allowing him to experience closeness without fear. He realized that this was something he had never had before, a partner who accepted him fully, even in his timid ways. One rainy afternoon, Clara asked Ethan to teach her how to saddle a horse properly. At first he felt nervous, worried he would appear clumsy or impatient. But as he guided her hands, explaining each step carefully, he noticed something surprising. He was enjoying the process. Her enthusiasm and laughter as she struggled to balance made him smile. When she finally managed to saddle the horse, she hugged him tightly in celebration. That hug, simple and unassuming, made Ethan's heart race. It was a small victory, not just for her, but for the growing bond between them. Clara also helped Ethan see the beauty of small joys in life. She pointed out the patterns in the clouds, the songs of the birds, and the way morning dew sparkled on the grass. At first, he had been too focused on chores to notice these details. But with her, every moment became an opportunity to see the world differently. Ethan realized that Clara's curiosity and joy were not only infectious, but transformative. She was teaching him to embrace life beyond work, to appreciate the small wonders he had overlooked for so long. Their evenings often ended with quiet reflections. Clara would ask him how he felt, what he enjoyed, and what scared him. Ethan had never been asked these questions. He struggled at first to answer honestly, unsure of his own emotions. But Clara's patience encouraged him to speak, even in fragments. Over time, he began to recognize and name his feelings: fear, excitement, curiosity, and even happiness. These were new experiences for him, and sharing them created a closeness he had never imagined possible. Despite the growing closeness, Ethan still trembled at the thought of fully expressing himself. He worried that his awkwardness might push her away, that his shyness might be too much to overcome. But Clara's gentle presence reassured him. She never pressured him, never criticized, and never made him feel small. Her acceptance allowed him to be vulnerable without fear. With each passing day, he felt his confidence grow, small but steady, like a river carving its path through the land. By the end of the second week, Ethan realized that something had changed in him. The shy, reserved man who had once hesitated at her touch, who had stumbled over words and retreated into silence, was slowly opening up. He was beginning to anticipate her questions, enjoy her playful teasing, and share his thoughts freely. Life on the ranch had transformed from a solitary routine into a shared journey, one filled with laughter, learning, and small moments of connection. Clara's presence had become a source of light in his quiet world. Her curiosity, patience, and joy had taught him that being shy was not a weakness, but a part of who he was. And more importantly, he had learned that trust and love could grow slowly, nurtured by attention, kindness, and shared experiences. As they walked together one evening, heading back to the house after feeding the animals, Ethan looked at Clara and noticed how the sunset painted her hair with golden light. A warm feeling spread through him, a mixture of gratitude, affection, and newfound courage. For the first time, he truly believed that this marriage, this partnership, could be a source of happiness rather than fear. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by fields and the soft sounds of nature, Ethan felt the first real stirrings of love for his bride, Clara. By the beginning of the third week, Ethan and Clara's connection had grown stronger. The initial awkwardness that had defined their first encounters had begun to fade, replaced by a quiet understanding. Ethan still felt shy at times, especially when Clara looked at him with her bright, curious eyes, but he no longer trembled as much as he had before. He had started to trust her, to believe that she genuinely wanted to know him, and that trust gave him courage. Clara had a special way of noticing the little things that mattered to Ethan. She observed how he carefully arranged the tools in the barn, how he always made sure the animals were comfortable before doing anything else, and how he sometimes paused to watch the sunset in silence. She didn't tease him about these habits. Instead, she asked questions, wanting to understand why he did things a certain way. Ethan explained carefully, and Clara listened with a smile that made him feel appreciated. Each explanation, each small story about his life, felt like a thread weaving them closer together. One morning, Clara suggested that they try planting a new section of the garden together. Ethan hesitated at first. He wasn't sure if she would enjoy the work or if she would be patient enough for the slow pace of farming. But Clara's enthusiasm was contagious. She laughed as she dug into the soil, her hands moving with curiosity and energy. Ethan found himself smiling, amazed at how her joy made even the hardest tasks feel lighter. They worked side by side, talking about the plants, the animals, and their dreams for the future. By the time they finished, the garden looked beautiful, and Ethan realized that sharing work with her made it feel meaningful in a way he hadn't felt before. Clara also encouraged Ethan to share more about himself. She asked about his childhood, his favorite memories, and even his fears. At first, he spoke slowly, unsure how much to reveal, but her patience and genuine interest made him comfortable. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning from his parents, and about the times he had felt lonely but determined to carry on. Clara listened without interruption, sometimes nodding, sometimes offering a soft word of encouragement. Each conversation felt like a door opening, allowing Ethan to step further out of his shy shell. One afternoon, they decided to ride to the nearby creek, a quiet spot where the water ran clear over smooth stones. Ethan had often gone there alone, enjoying the peace, but with Clara, it felt different. She asked him about the plants and animals along the way, pointing out things he had overlooked in his solitary walks. He found himself explaining, laughing, and even joking, a side of him he had rarely shown anyone. By the time they reached the creek, they were both smiling, sitting side by side on the rocks, letting the cool water run over their boots. It was a small adventure, but it strengthened their bond, showing Ethan that life could be both peaceful and exciting when shared. Evenings had become a special time for them. They would sit on the porch with a cup of tea, sharing stories and reflections from the day. Clara often asked Ethan how he felt, not just about work or chores, but about himself. At first, he struggled to put his emotions into words. He had never been asked to think about his feelings so openly, but Clara's gentle questions encouraged him to try. He learned to say things like, "I enjoyed today," or "I felt happy when you laughed." These small expressions of emotion built a foundation of trust between them, teaching Ethan that sharing his feelings was not dangerous, it was a way to connect. Clara also had a playful side that brought laughter to the ranch. She liked to challenge Ethan in little ways, like racing him to the barn, teasing him about being too careful with the animals, or pretending to get lost while exploring the fields. At first, Ethan felt nervous during these playful moments, unsure how to react. But over time, he began to enjoy them, laughing freely and feeling a lightness he hadn't known in years. Her playfulness balanced the seriousness of ranch life, showing him that life could be both fun and meaningful. One day, Clara suggested they try baking bread together. Ethan had never baked before, and he worried that he would make mistakes. Clara reassured him with her usual warmth, and they worked side by side in the kitchen. Flour dusted the counter and their hands as they kneaded the dough, and Ethan found himself smiling at her cheerful chatter. When the bread came out golden and fragrant from the oven, they shared a proud, quiet moment of accomplishment. That day, Ethan realized that learning new things with Clara was not frightening, it was exciting, a chance to grow together. Trust between them grew not just in moments of fun, but in moments of vulnerability as well. Clara often asked Ethan about his worries and fears. At first, he was hesitant to share, unsure if his fears were worth mentioning. But she listened patiently, offering comfort without judgment. When he admitted his anxieties about running the ranch alone or about the challenges of life, Clara encouraged him, reminding him that he was capable and strong. These conversations, though sometimes difficult, deepened their bond, showing Ethan that love could be gentle, supportive, and steadfast. There were moments of quiet intimacy that didn't require words. Sometimes Ethan would catch Clara watching the sunset, her expression thoughtful, and he would sit beside her in comfortable silence. Other times they would walk through the fields, their hands brushing together by accident, causing Ethan's heart to race. These small moments, simple yet profound, taught him that connection wasn't always about grand gestures. It was about being present, noticing each other, and sharing life's small joys. Clara had a way of noticing when Ethan needed encouragement. One afternoon, he had been feeling frustrated because a fence he had repaired earlier in the week had been damaged by a storm. He was quiet, brooding over the setback, when Clara approached him with a gentle smile. She reminded him that mistakes and setbacks were part of life, that he had already accomplished so much, and that the ranch would thrive because of his care. Her words, soft yet confident, made Ethan feel seen and understood. He realized that with Clara by his side, challenges felt lighter and burdens could be shared. The bond between them grew stronger each day, but it was not without moments of tension. Ethan still struggled to express himself fully, and there were times when Clara's curiosity or playful teasing made him retreat inward. Yet, Clara never reacted with frustration. Instead, she gave him space, allowing him to process his feelings and return when he was ready. This patience taught Ethan that love wasn't about rushing or demanding. It was about understanding and respect. Clara also introduced Ethan to new experiences that stretched his comfort zone. She suggested they try fishing in the pond nearby, an activity he had never attempted seriously. At first, he was hesitant, unsure of his skill or patience for the task. But with Clara's guidance, he learned to cast the line, wait patiently, and enjoy the rhythm of the water. When he caught his first fish, Clara clapped and cheered, her excitement infectious. Ethan laughed, realizing that stepping outside his comfort zone with her was not frightening, it was rewarding. Nights brought their own kind of connection. After long days of work, they would sit together on the porch, listening to the sounds of the ranch at night, the chirping of crickets, the soft rustle of the wind, and the occasional call of an owl. These quiet moments allowed Ethan to reflect on his feelings. He noticed how much he had grown since Clara's arrival. He was more open, more trusting, and more willing to embrace life fully. Her presence had brought warmth, curiosity, and a sense of adventure into his world, transforming his quiet routine into something vibrant and shared. By the end of the third week, Ethan could no longer deny the change in himself. The shy, reserved man who had trembled at the thought of sharing his life with Clara had begun to feel confident, capable, and connected. He looked forward to their days together, their small adventures, and even the quiet chores that had once felt lonely. Clara had helped him discover that life could be filled with laughter, trust, and shared joy. And Clara, in turn, had learned to appreciate the depth of Ethan's character, the way he cared for the land, his patience with animals, and the thoughtfulness that underpinned his quiet demeanor. She realized that his shyness was not a flaw, but a part of the man she had come to admire and love. Together, they were building a life where trust and connection were the foundation, and where new experiences could be embraced with courage and curiosity. The third week ended with a special evening. As the sun dipped low, Ethan and Clara walked hand in hand through the fields, pausing to watch the golden light filter through the trees. Ethan felt a surge of emotion, gratitude, affection, and a deep sense of trust. He realized that Clara had become more than a companion. She had become his partner in every sense, someone who could share both work and joy, quiet moments and small adventures. In that moment, Ethan understood that the bond they were forming would shape not just their days, but their hearts. Forever by the fourth week, the bond between Ethan and Clara had grown stronger than either of them had imagined. Ethan had become more comfortable around her, his shyness giving way to quiet confidence. Yet there was still a part of him that hesitated, a small voice that wondered if he was truly ready to embrace new experiences fully. Clara noticed this hesitation but never forced him. Instead, she encouraged him gently, showing him that trust and love were about patience, understanding, and shared courage. One morning, Clara came to Ethan with a sparkle in her eyes. "I have an idea," she said softly, her excitement barely contained. Ethan looked at her, curious but nervous. He knew that her ideas often meant trying something new, something outside the familiar rhythm of the ranch. "What is it?" he asked cautiously. Clara smiled and explained that she wanted to explore a part of the ranch he rarely visited, a hidden grove of trees at the far end of the property. She wanted them to go there together to see the sunrise and perhaps share a small adventure along the way. Ethan hesitated. The path to the grove was rough, and the terrain was unfamiliar. He worried that she might tire easily or that he would make a mistake. But Clara's gentle persistence encouraged him, and finally he nodded. "All right," he said, "let's go." As they prepared for the walk, Ethan felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He wasn't used to such ventures, especially with someone by his side, but he trusted Clara, and that trust gave him courage. The walk to the grove was quiet at first. Ethan led the way, pointing out familiar landmarks and explaining the changes in the terrain. Clara listened carefully, asking questions and occasionally laughing at small discoveries. A brightly colored bird, an unusual flower, or a stone that looked like a tiny sculpture. Her curiosity and joy made the journey feel lighter, and Ethan found himself smiling more freely than he had in weeks. For the first time, he realized that adventure could be shared, and that sharing it made it even more meaningful. As they reached the grove, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, casting golden patterns on the ground. Clara gasped softly, awed by the beauty, and Ethan felt a warm feeling spread through his chest. He had seen the sunrise countless times before, but with her by his side, it felt entirely new. The grove, once just a distant part of the ranch, now held a special significance, a place of wonder, discovery, and connection. They stood together in silence, letting the moment sink in, their hands brushing lightly. Ethan's heart raced, but he didn't pull away. He trusted her. Clara suggested they explore the grove further, venturing deeper into the trees. Ethan hesitated briefly, feeling a flutter of nervousness. He had never been this far alone, and now he was sharing it with someone else. But Clara's reassuring smile and gentle encouragement helped him take the first step. As they moved together, Ethan noticed how her presence made him aware of things he had ignored for years. The scent of the earth, the rustling of leaves, and the soft calls of birds hidden in the branches. Her curiosity sharpened his senses, making the grove feel alive in a way he had never experienced alone. During their exploration, Clara suggested they try something playful. She picked up a small branch and twirled it, pretending it was a sword. "Come on," she said, laughing. "Let's see if you can keep up." Ethan felt a wave of nervousness. He had never played like this before, never allowed himself to be silly or uncoordinated in someone else's presence. But when he saw Clara's laughter and joy, he took a deep breath and joined her. They chased each other around small clearings, laughing and stumbling over roots. Ethan's heart raced, but in a good way. He was experiencing freedom, trust, and fun all at once. After their playful adventure, they found a quiet spot in the grove to rest. Clara leaned against a tree, her eyes sparkling with contentment. She looked at Ethan and said softly, "I'm glad we're doing this together." Ethan felt a warmth spread through him. Her words were simple, but they carried meaning. He realized that sharing new experiences, even small ones, was helping him grow. He was learning to embrace life with curiosity, courage, and trust. Clara noticed Ethan's nervousness when she suggested trying a small activity she had planned. She wanted them to experience something unfamiliar, a way to symbolize the trust they were building. Ethan's heart raced at the idea, but Clara's gentle encouragement made him nod. He realized that this wasn't about perfection or skill. It was about being together, supporting each other, and stepping beyond the comfort of routine. With a deep breath, he agreed to try, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. The activity was simple but meaningful. Clara guided him carefully, explaining each step and ensuring he felt safe. Ethan's hands trembled at first, and he hesitated, unsure of himself. But Clara's presence gave him courage. She smiled, offered gentle reassurances, and waited patiently as he slowly took each step. With her guidance, he began to relax, discovering a sense of confidence he hadn't felt before. When he finally completed the task, he felt a rush of pride and joy. Clara clapped, her laughter ringing through the grove, and Ethan realized that he had overcome his fear not alone, but with her by his side. The moment in the grove became a turning point for Ethan. He understood that trust was not just about words. It was about shared experiences, patience, and willingness to step into the unknown. Clara had shown him that being nervous or uncertain didn't mean failure. It meant he was human, learning, and growing. The experience strengthened their bond, deepening their emotional connection in a way that neither words nor actions alone could achieve. Afterward, they walked back to the ranch, the grove fading behind them but leaving a lasting impression on their hearts. Ethan felt lighter, freer, and more open to the world around him. Clara's presence had transformed a simple walk into an adventure filled with trust, laughter, and shared courage. He realized that embracing new experiences didn't mean losing himself. It meant discovering parts of life and himself that he had never known. That evening, they sat on the porch, sipping tea and watching the sky turn from gold to soft purple. Ethan reflected on the day, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for Clara's presence in his life. He had learned that life could be shared in ways that brought joy, confidence, and love. Clara's patience and encouragement had helped him step beyond fear, embrace new experiences, and see the world with fresh eyes. Clara, too, felt the change in Ethan. She noticed how he moved with more confidence, how his laughter was freer, and how his eyes held a spark she hadn't seen before. She realized that their shared experiences were not just shaping him, they were shaping them both. Trust, love, and courage were growing quietly, yet steadily, in their hearts. Over the next few days, Clara continued to encourage Ethan to try small adventures, each one building on the last. Sometimes it was exploring new parts of the ranch, other times it was trying a new skill or activity together. Ethan still felt nervous occasionally, but each time he faced that nervousness with Clara's support, he grew stronger and more confident. He began to see that stepping out of his comfort zone was not frightening when he had someone by his side who understood and believed in him. One afternoon, as they repaired a fence together, Clara paused and looked at Ethan. "Do you remember the first time we went to the grove?" she asked. Ethan nodded, smiling. "I was so nervous," he admitted. "I didn't think I could do it." Clara laughed softly. "And now?" she asked. Ethan thought for a moment, realizing how much he had changed. "Now, I feel like I can try anything," he said quietly, his voice filled with a mix of pride and gratitude. Clara reached out and squeezed his hand, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they were taking together. That night, as they sat watching the stars, Ethan felt a quiet certainty in his heart. He had learned that love was not just about words or promises. It was about patience, trust, and shared experiences. Clara had taught him to face fear with courage, to embrace new experiences, and to trust not only in her but also in himself. He realized that this turning point in their relationship was not a single moment, but a series of small steps, each one strengthening their bond and preparing them for the journey ahead. Ethan knew there would still be moments of nervousness, moments when his shyness would return. But he also knew that with Clara by his side, he could face those moments with confidence. She had shown him that trust and love could be built gradually, through patience, understanding, and shared courage. And as he looked at her, sitting beside him under the wide, star-filled sky, he felt a deep sense of peace and hope. The turning point had arrived, not with grand gestures or dramatic events, but with simple, meaningful moments, walking through the grove, trying new things together, and supporting each other through nervousness and uncertainty. Ethan had learned that embracing life with courage, curiosity, and trust was possible, and that with Clara, he could face anything. And so, in that quiet ranch, under the endless sky and surrounded by the land he loved, Ethan and Clara took their first steps toward a deeper, more trusting, and more joyful relationship. The shy rancher had begun to let go of fear, and the bride had become both his guide and companion. Together, they were ready to face the future, hand in hand, heart to heart, and with a sense of hope and excitement for the journey that lay ahead. By the fifth week, Ethan and Clara had grown even closer. The shy, nervous rancher who had trembled at her first playful suggestions was now more confident, more open, and more willing to share his world with someone he trusted deeply. The bond they had built over weeks of shared work, quiet moments, and gentle encouragement had blossomed into a profound companionship. It was not a flashy or dramatic love, but a steady, quiet connection that grew stronger with every shared sunrise, every laugh, and every conversation. Their mornings began to feel different now. Ethan would wake before the sun, but instead of moving silently through his chores alone, he now looked forward to Clara joining him. Together, they fed the animals, checked the fences, and tended to the fields. Clara moved naturally beside him, sometimes asking questions, sometimes simply observing. Her presence had become comforting, like a gentle wind that moved through the ranch, carrying warmth and light. Ethan found himself talking more, explaining his work and his routines, sometimes even laughing at small mistakes or playful accidents. One morning, as they were gathering eggs from the chicken coop, Clara asked Ethan about his favorite memories on the ranch. At first, he hesitated, unsure what to say, but Clara's encouraging smile made him feel safe. He began to tell her about the first time he had ridden a horse alone, about the lessons his parents had taught him, and about the nights he had spent watching the stars, feeling both small and connected to the world. Clara listened with genuine interest, occasionally reaching out to touch his arm, and Ethan felt a warmth spread through him. For the first time, he realized that sharing his life with someone didn't make it less his own, it made it richer. Clara, in turn, shared her own stories, her laughter and excitement lighting up the ranch. She talked about her childhood, the adventures she had imagined, and the dreams she held for the future. Ethan listened carefully, noticing how her energy brought life to every corner of the property. He admired her courage, her curiosity, and her willingness to embrace new experiences. And he realized that he, too, had changed. He was more open to adventure, more willing to step outside his comfort zone, and more eager to embrace the joy that life could offer. Their afternoons often involved small adventures. Sometimes it was exploring new areas of the ranch, climbing gentle hills, or walking along the creek. Other times it was learning a new skill together, baking bread, repairing equipment, or planting a new patch of crops. Each activity became a shared experience, a way for them to learn about each other and about themselves. Ethan found that with Clara by his side, challenges felt lighter, work felt more meaningful, and even small joys were amplified by their shared presence. One day, Clara suggested they take a quiet picnic to a nearby meadow. Ethan hesitated briefly, unsure if the idea was practical or necessary. But Clara's gentle insistence encouraged him, and he agreed. They packed simple food, carried a blanket, and walked together to the meadow. The sun was warm, the grass soft beneath their feet, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. Sitting side by side, they shared food, laughed at little mishaps, and enjoyed the beauty of the day. Ethan realized that it was not the grandeur of the setting, but the companionship that made the moment special. Evenings remained their favorite time. They would sit on the porch after a long day, sipping tea, watching the sky change colors, and reflecting on the day's experiences. Ethan often found himself opening up more freely, sharing thoughts and feelings he had once kept hidden. Clara would listen patiently, her gentle questions encouraging him to explore his emotions further. He discovered that he could be honest about his fears, his joys, and even his uncertainties, and that in sharing these, he felt a sense of relief and connection. There were also quiet, tender moments that didn't require words. Sometimes, Ethan would catch Clara looking at him with affection, and he would feel a warm flutter in his chest. Other times they would sit in silence, their hands touching lightly, or their shoulders brushing as they watched the sun set over the fields. These small moments of intimacy, simple yet profound, deepened their emotional bond. Ethan learned that love was not always about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was about presence, trust, and the steady comfort of shared life. Clara noticed the changes in Ethan as well. The man who had once trembled at the thought of new experiences was now confident in his abilities and in their relationship. His laughter was freer, his words more open, and his actions more assured. She felt proud of the patience and courage he had shown, and she realized that their journey together had shaped both of them. Trust, respect, and love had become the foundation of their life on the ranch. One afternoon, while repairing a fence together, Ethan paused and looked at Clara. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for her presence in his life. "I don't think I could have done this without you," he said quietly. Clara smiled, her eyes bright. "You've done it all yourself, Ethan. I just helped you see it," she replied. In that simple exchange, they acknowledged the growth they had experienced together. Ethan had learned courage and trust, and Clara had learned patience and understanding. Their shared experiences also helped them understand the beauty of compromise and collaboration. Sometimes, they disagreed on the best way to handle a task or the best path to take on an adventure. But instead of letting disagreements cause tension, they learned to listen, respect each other's opinions, and find solutions together. These small lessons in teamwork strengthened their partnership, teaching them that love was not just about affection, but about collaboration, patience, and mutual respect. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan began to realize that Clara had become more than a companion. She was his partner in every sense. He trusted her not just with small tasks or daily routines, but with his thoughts, dreams, and fears. Her presence had transformed his quiet, solitary life into one filled with joy, laughter, and shared discovery. For the first time, he felt a deep sense of contentment and hope for the future. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat together on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange. Ethan turned to Clara and said, "I never thought I could feel this happy." Clara smiled softly, reaching out to touch his hand. "You've always had it inside you," she said. "I just helped you see it." Ethan realized that happiness was not about grand events or dramatic changes. It was about connection, trust, and the small moments of life shared with someone who truly cared. Their love continued to grow through small, meaningful rituals. They shared morning coffee, evening walks, and quiet talks before bed. They celebrated small victories, fixing a fence, planting a new garden, catching a fish, and comforted each other during minor setbacks. Each day reinforced the lessons they had learned about trust, patience, and shared joy. The shy rancher had become more confident, and the lively bride had become a source of guidance, support, and companionship. Clara often reminded Ethan of the journey they had taken together. "Remember when we went to the grove?" she asked one afternoon. Ethan laughed softly, remembering the nervous excitement he had felt. "I was terrified," he admitted. Clara smiled. "And now," Ethan thought for a moment. "Now I feel like I can face anything," he said, his voice filled with confidence and warmth. That simple exchange captured the transformation that had taken place, not just in him, but in the partnership they had built together. By the end of the 5th week, Ethan and Clara had established a life filled with love, trust, and shared purpose. They had learned to navigate nervousness, embrace new experiences, and support each other through challenges. Their bond was not built on instant passion, but on gradual growth, patience, and understanding. They had discovered that the truest form of love was quiet, steadfast, and rooted in shared life experiences. On a warm evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Ethan and Clara walked hand in hand through the fields. The ranch, once a place of solitude and routine, now felt alive with the presence of their connection. Ethan looked at Clara and smiled, realizing that he had found not just a partner but a companion, a friend, and a source of inspiration. Clara looked back at him, her eyes full of affection, and knew that together they could face anything life had to offer. In those quiet moments, surrounded by the land they both loved, Ethan and Clara understood that their journey was only beginning. They had grown together, learned together, and built a foundation of trust and love that would carry them forward. The shy rancher had discovered courage and confidence, and the lively bride had found the joy of guiding and sharing in someone's growth. Together, they had transformed their world into one filled with laughter, understanding, and heartfelt companionship. And so life on the ranch continued, not as it had before, quiet and solitary, but alive with shared moments, trust, and love. Ethan and Clara had learned that the most meaningful experiences were not always grand or dramatic, but small, everyday moments filled with connection, care, and patience. Their story had reached a place of fulfillment, where love was steady, trust was deep, and happiness was found in the simple, shared joys of life.